Good morning, everybody. Dr. Vasquez here, coming to you live this Monday morning today in order to follow up on what I said I would do previously, which is provide a little bit of introduction, which I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible. I've already introduced this topic and this activity a few times. So for those of you who do care, you've already heard the introduction. For those of you who don't care, it doesn't matter anyway. So I'll try to keep this fresh and short. So what I'm going to do is provide two components to the introduction. One will be something I'm going to read to you out of the Hollingdale translation, just so that you have some perspective. I think it's pretty radical. And then I'll provide a sample from Naxos, just to provide some introduction. And then the way that I think this is going to work is I'm going to read the first intro part from the Kaufman 1954 translation, which is basically Zarathustra coming down the hill. As he's coming down the hill in part 2, he encounters a hermit living in the mountain. And then after that, he makes it into the city and he tries to announce his new philosophy to them. But of course, they can't hear it because they're all watching YouTube and TikTok. So again, two components to the introduction, something I'm going to read out of the Hollingdale introduction, which I never knew and was pretty radical. Then I'll give you a clip out of the Naxos intro, and then I'll dive right into reading these two sections. And then the third section, maybe all three sections will come from Naxos, so you can have a comparison. So obviously, I don't have any privilege to use the Naxos version, but within a context of comparative interpretation, within reason, that falls within appropriate use. So something that I read in the Hollingdale translation, which I had never known before. And so what I'm trying to do is kind of merge the gap between Christianity and Nietzsche's philosophy. At times, those are clearly oppositional. But you have to also remember, what is religion and what is Christianity? I mean, even within Christianity, what do we have? Like 30 different versions of it. So, and then when you consider, so Christianity isn't obviously just one religion. You have like the core religion, and then you have all these offshoots and branches, including like Latter-day Saints and Jehovah's Witness and Catholic and Lutheran and Protestant. Sometimes they even fight among each other. So you can't say, no one can say that Christianity is just one topic or one religion. But anyway, Nietzsche was at times very critical of religion for its social and political impact. But at times he was also quite compassionate toward religion in general and Christianity in particular. You got to remember, for those of you who don't know, Nietzsche's father was a Lutheran pastor, and his grandfather, I believe, also was a pastor. So Nietzsche grew up surrounded by, the Christian church. And in his early studies, he was planning to become apparently like a scholar of Christianity or a pastor maybe. And then he later just went into pure philosophy. So anyway, I've already explained what he meant by his famous phrase, God is dead, which is going to come up here in a moment. Again, that wasn't an anti-Christian statement or an anti-religious statement. What he was saying is that religious faith per se obviously doesn't guide society anymore. And so for that reason, despite all the lip service, I mean, religion just doesn't guide society. I mean, look at capitalism, look at so-called socialism, look at communism, look at religious fanaticism, look at racism. I mean, those are the things that drive society. So Nietzsche, in order to lay the groundwork for his new philosophy being announced through his fictional character, Zarathustra, he's saying, you can be religious all you want, but the fact is society isn't run by legitimate religious principles anymore. So that's why he said God is dead. And what he said is that we as humanity and we as human species have to appropriately orient ourselves to the reality of life, basically. I mean, that's a starting place. So anyway, like I said, when I was reading the Hollingdale intro, which goes to about page 36, Hollingdale, being much more insightful than Kaufman, noted that basically the core tenets of Zarathustra come from Christianity, and in particular Lutheran pietism. And apparently Hollingdale himself didn't know that until someone criticized one of his reviews or books, and then Hollingdale said, wow, I didn't know that, but it turns out to be true. Here, without more ado, are what I take to be the Christian parallels to the conceptions which dominated Nietzsche's mind during the period from summer 1881 to January 1883 to 84, when they found full expression in Zarathustra. So some of the most typical themes and famous themes that were made famous in Zarathustra are things like amor fati, which is directly out of Lutheran Christianity, eternal recurrence, will to power, and even the overman, according to Hollingdale's interpretation. So, for those of you who are, let's say, at one extreme, like strict, literal Lutherans or Christians, you can see some parallels in Zarathustra, which apparently come directly from Lutheran Christianity. And so anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. So right now, when I edit the video, I'm going to play the introduction from Naxos, just so you can get a taste and a perspective from that. And then I'll come back to read part one, which again, it's called the prologue, so legitimately it's not even part one. But it is when Nietzsche initiates his descent down the mountain. So as soon as I find the page, I will read that. So here it is from...
Thus spoke Zarathustra, a book for all and none, by Friedrich Nietzsche.
Also sprach Zarathustra was conceived and written by Friedrich Nietzsche during the years 1881 to 1885. The first three parts were published in 1883 and 1884. The book formed part of his campaign against morality, in which Nietzsche explored the ethical consequences of the death of God. Heavily critical not only of Christian values, but also of their modern replacements, Thus Spoke Zarathustra argues for a new value system based around the prophecy of the Übermensch, or Superman. For the first time, Nietzsche gives his philosophy a narrative frame. The founder of the ancient religion of Persia, Zarathustra, takes the central role. Rejected by society at large, Zarathustra gains a devoted band of followers to whom he delivers discourses on a huge range of subjects. Haunted by visions and driven by his own will to power, Zarathustra eventually leaves these friends to return to his lonely mountain home, where he makes his most important discovery, that of the eternal return. A literary as well as a philosophical masterpiece, Thus Spoke Zarathustra survived an initially poor reception to be recognized as a seminal text in modern culture. Its appropriation by the National Socialist movement in Germany early in the 20th century has tainted its reputation unjustly, but there are signs that the rehabilitation of Nietzsche, and of this his most incendiary work, is almost complete. Part 1. Prologue. The work begins with a prologue introducing us to Zarathustra. After the briefest indication of Zarathustra's background, we meet the thinker at a decisive point in his life. Having spent 10 years in solitude among the mountains, he finally returns to human society to present his radical new ideas, most notably the prophecy of the Übermensch, the Superman.
Zarathustra's Prologue.
So it's called, the way it's structured here is Zarathustra's Prologue Part 1, which is actually before the legitimate Part 1. And then, like I said, I'll read Part 1 from there, just to keep it going. I will read Part 2 of the Prologue from Hollingdale. Yeah, and Part 3 then is when Nietzsche is in the town. So I'm going to try to read these without changing the words. So I'm very familiar with different translations, especially the Naxos version, which I've probably heard 1,000 times. So the temptation that I'm going to have is to change the language or change the wording to make it smoother, but I'm going to try to read it without changing it, even though that'll probably be more difficult than it sounds. So, yeah, I'll do part 1 out of here, part 2 out of here, and part 3, I'll either read it or let the Naxos version take over at that point. All right. Zarathustra's prologue, part 1, out of Kaufman. Here it comes. When Zarathustra was 30 years old, he left his home and the lake of his home and went into the mountains. Here he enjoyed his spirit and his solitude, and for 10 years did not tire of it. But at last a change came over his heart, and one morning he rose with the rosy dawn, stepped before the sun, and spoke thus to it. You great star, what would be your happiness had you not those for whom you shine? For 10 years you have climbed to my cave, and you would have tired of your light and of the journey had it not been for me, my eagle, and my serpent. But we waited for you every morning, took your overflow from you, and blessed you for it. Behold, I am weary of my wisdom. Like the bee that has gathered too much honey, I need hands outstretched to take it. I would give away and distribute until the wise among men find joy once again in their folly, and the poor in their riches. For that I must descend into the depths, as you do in the evening when you go behind the sea and still bring light to the underworld, you abundant star. Like you, I must go under, go down, as is said by man, to whom I must descend. So bless me then, you tranquil eye, that can look even upon the greatest happiness without envy. Bless the cup that wants to overflow, that the water may flow from it golden and carry everywhere the reflection of your bliss. Behold, this cup wants to become empty again, and Zarathustra wants to become man again. Thus Zarathustra began to go under. So I did change a few of the words, just because I don't like some of the words that Kaufman uses, and I think it flows better. You'll see that in the Naxos version. So basically that was Zarathustra expressing his love for life and saying, I want to share what I've learned with other people, and I can't live like a monk here in the mountains, so I'm going to go down the hill. So part 2 is him going down the hill, and then he eventually makes it into the city. And I think I'll let Naxos take over at part 3, but with part 1 and part 2 included, just so you can get the contrast. You'll see that when they hired, professional actors and readers, that they just did a fantastic job. So like I said before, Naxos is a company that just specializes in things that are kind of classical music, and the classical so-called reading of classical books. And they've done a few of Nietzsche's, and they've done other philosophers as well. So here's part 2 out of the prologue from the Hollingdale translation. We'll see how this goes. Zarathustra went down the mountain alone, and no one met him. But when he entered the forest, an old man who had left his holy hut to look for roots in the forest suddenly stood before him, and the old man spoke thus to Zarathustra. This wanderer is no stranger to me. He passed by here many years ago. He was called Zarathustra, but he has changed. Then you carried your ashes into the mountains. Will you today carry your fire into the valleys? Do you not fear an incendiary's punishment? Yes, I recognize Zarathustra. His eyes are clear, and no disgust lurks about his mouth. Does he not go along like a dancer? How changed Zarathustra is. Zarathustra has become a child, an awakened one. What do you want now with the sleepers? You lived in solitude as in the sea, and the sea bore you. Alas, do you want to go ashore? Alas, do you want to go again, to drag your body yourself? Zarathustra answered, I love mankind. Why, said the saint, did I go into the forest and the desert? Was it not because I loved mankind all too much? Now I love God. Mankind I do not love. Man is too imperfect a thing for me. Love for mankind would destroy me. Zarathustra answered, what did I say of love? I am bringing mankind a gift. Give them nothing, said the saint. Rather take something off of them and bear it with them. That will please them best, if only it be pleasing to you. And if you want to give something to them, give them no more than an alms, and let them beg for it. No, said Zarathustra, I give no alms. I am not poor enough for that. I think I'll let it go there. So, again, that's The second part, Zarathustra coming down the mountain. As he's coming down the mountain, he encounters this saint in the forest, and then he makes it to the city. And then, once he's in the city, things get a little bit wild. So I'll just let the Naxos version play out for the comparison. I hope that some of you have an interest in the book, even though I either read it with more or less competence. But especially the Naxos version is just a real pleasure. So that's pretty much all I want to say. Like I said before, for those of you who are interested, you'll get it. For those of you who are not, then none of this matters. So I hope you all have a great day, and I'll post some other nutrition stuff later today. Take care. Bye.
Zarathustra's Prologue. When Zarathustra was 30 years old, he left his home and the lake of his home, and went into the mountains. There he enjoyed his spirit and solitude, and for 10 years did not weary of it. But at last his heart changed, and rising one morning with the rosy dawn, he went before the sun, and spoke thus to it. You great star, what would be your happiness if you had not those for whom you shine? For 10 years have you climbed hither to my cave. You would have wearied of your light and of the journey, had it not... When Zarathustra arrived at the nearest town which adjoins the forest, he found many people assembled in the marketplace, for it had been announced that a rope dancer would give a performance. And Zarathustra spoke thus to the people. I teach you the Superman. Man is something that is to be surpassed. What have you done to surpass man? All beings hitherto have created something beyond themselves, and you want to be the ebb of that great tide, and would rather go back to the beast than surpass man? What is the ape to man? A laughing-stock, a thing of shame. And just the same shall man be to the Superman, a laughing-stock, a thing of shame. You have made your way from the worm to man, and much within you is still worm. Once were you apes, and even yet man is more of an ape than any of the apes. Even the wisest among you is only a disharmony and hybrid of plant and